Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin in Whitehorse, where there are growing concerns about short-term rentals and their effect on the housing crisis. It's not cheap to rent in the city. Some blame companies like Airbnb and Neighbourly North, saying they contribute to the sky-high cost of rent. Rafsan Farouk-Jugal brings us the story.
People from across the country move to the Yukon for its beauty. They also move here looking for work. Compared to 2016, the population has increased by almost 30%. A lack of housing supply and high inflation is making life difficult for many. Mirabel Sequoia moved to Whitehorse from Vancouver. She was told by her friends and family that housing is cheaper outside the big cities.
Millennials or younger generations need to move to more rural places to afford housing. And they're talking about places like Whitehorse, which I know might not feel as rural to us, but like they're talking about moving to places like Whitehorse where they think it's going to be cheaper. And the reality is it's not the case.
Housing is the biggest expense for most Canadians. In this neighborhood of Whitehorse and Whistlebend, folks can expect to pay up to $3,000 for a two-bedroom place all-inclusive. Prices that are simply not affordable for many working people.
I know that there's like that famous thing that everyone says about it's like rent should be a third of your income, and it's never been that for me.
More than half of Sequoia's salary goes to rent. That means saving up for a down payment on a home is only a dream.
It's never felt like a realistic goal or expectation for me to have. It's like I don't feel like I could ever afford to own a home in this city.
Now that's a sentiment also echoed by her neighbors across town in Riverdale. Andrea Simpson moved to Yukon about a decade ago. She was finally able to buy a house after saving up for 4 years. But she says things are different now. She says if she moved to the Yukon in 2024, she would not be able to save up money for a down payment on a home. The cost of living is just too high.
No, we wouldn't have been able to do it. There's just like unequivocally wouldn't have been able to save enough with both housing prices the way they are, as well as interest is way more than it was when we first got our place.
A lack of housing supply and a growing number of short-term rentals is driving up prices, she says.
But there's no incentive for people to have them to long-term tenants. Why would you when you could rent it out for $3,000 a month, or you could have it on a short-term rental and make $5,000, $6,000 a month.
Short-term rental companies like Airbnb, Vrbo, and Neighbourly North are active in the community. The Yukon government gave Neighbourly North $180,000 to build a rental app. Both Mirabel Sequoia and Andrea Simpson say that is a problem. On tomorrow's Northbeat, we will get reactions from the Yukon government, the municipality of Whitehorse, Neighbourly North, and other local stakeholders. Rafsan Farouk-Jugal, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Power outages are repeatedly hitting Wati in the Northwest Territories. It's been happening for over a year. The most recent was just yesterday, and many in the community are frustrated. Luke Carroll has that story.
Like many of the previous outages, yesterday's came during a particularly cold day. For Marianne Jeremica, she's happy to have a wood stove, but she knows there's many in town who don't.
I know some units that people are renting, that there are specific policies that they cannot have a wood stove in there, and so I wonder what they do, like they have to go to family's house or stuff like that.
The Northwest Territories Power Corporation says the latest outage came from an issue with the fuel pump. It led to the 11th outage since January and the 35th since last April. The exact causes of the outages over that time have differed, but it largely stems from aging infrastructure and a growing community stretching the already thin grid.
It's great, as I said earlier, that there seems to be growth happening in Wati, but it does present us with some challenges.
The NTPC says there are plans to deal with these issues in the future, including replacing the aging power plant. But in the short term, the community will continue to be listed at a level 1 emergency, which means NTPC staff will be ready to respond to these types of outages. Luke Carroll, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The Goodlook Energy Corporation says there was no fire at the Calio power plant yesterday. Power in the city went out around 11:30 yesterday morning, and black smoke could be seen from the power plant. Some people called emergency services. Firefighters and EMS went to the plant. QEC says the smoke was from the generators, not from a fire. The power was restored to Calio in about 40 minutes. The first full sitting of the 20th NWT Legislative Assembly begins tomorrow. It runs until Friday, then breaks next week to start setting priorities. For one MLA, 2 issues are top of mind.
First and foremost for me is addressing the carbon tax and addressing the wildfire, the 2023 wildfires. And as much as there'll be time for questions to the ministers responsible for those portfolios, I think we need to take decisive action as an assembly to address both of those issues, and that's what I intend to do.
Testart says he'll call for an independent review of the wildfire response. Other MLAs mentioned carbon tax and emergency preparedness as top priorities, as well as improving medical travel and addictions aftercare treatment. The first full sitting wraps up February 29th. The Calio Housing Authority is preparing to appoint new board members. The board was dissolved last year after it was unable to negotiate a new collective agreement with its workers. Unionized staff were on strike for 130 days. An interim board was appointed to help resolve the strike, but now a new permanent board needs to be put in place.
I think with the pressures of the strike, had gone on beyond 5 months at that point, it was time to take some action and solve this, because the strike was, it wasn't a good situation for Calio as a whole. The nature of a strike, it's right in front of people's faces and can be a bit ugly at times. And I think, it was time to get the workers back to work.
Maine says he's hoping the new board will be in place by the end of this month. Treacherous trail conditions are wreaking havoc on the Yukon Quest. The big 450-mile dog sled race has been cut short to just 300 miles. Katrin Pilkington has that story.
Organizers made the decision late Sunday. A section of open water prevented mushers from passing at McCabe Creek. Race officials arranged transport to the other side, but it left them with concerns about the remote trail ahead. When mushers left Whitehorse Saturday afternoon, they knew the trail would be icy. At the starting line, musher Lou Twaddell was prepared for rough conditions.
When you hit the trail, it's just like, throw anything you want at me, I'm gonna make it through. But I even bought a helmet for this year, so preparing for icy conditions. Yeah.
But by midway through the race, things had gotten worse. Poor conditions meant volunteers were unable to reach a checkpoint between Pelly Crossing and Dawson by air or snowmobile. They were unable to judge trail conditions, and they wouldn't be able to offer mushers a place to rest or get supplies. Yukon Quest Executive Director Benjamin Smith said the decision wasn't easy.
The judges and marshals determined that it was in the best interest of all of the teams to not send teams forward from Pelly where we were unsure of what the conditions might be along the trail as they were moving onward. This was 100% a safety decision.
But ultimately, there was too much risk to competitors for the race to continue. Musher Michelle Phillips placed first in the event, arriving in Pelly Crossing earlier this afternoon. Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Weather also isn't doing residents of West Dawson any favors. The ice bridge connecting them to Dawson City is still closed. It's making life difficult for people in West Dawson who rely on Dawson City for healthcare and supplies. The Yukon government says people can still call 911 or access other online and over-the-phone health services in the meantime. The late opening is due to an ice jam at the Klondike and Yukon rivers that's making the freeze-up take longer, according to the territorial government. Last year, the Dawson Ice Bridge opened to light-duty vehicles on January 5th. Service Canada has formed a dedicated task force to help Nunavut's Arctic Winter Games athletes with their passport applications. As of last week, upwards of 70 athletes were without passports, and they need them to go to the Games in Alaska. Nunavut MP Lori Idlaut called out the federal government for a lack of passport services in the territory. Now, Service Canada says it's checking the status of each application. It says it'll determine the fastest and easiest way to deliver the passports, and it also says it'll work closely with the applicants to expedite delivery. The Arctic Winter Games begin March 10th. Police in London, Ontario apologized today to the victim of an alleged sexual assault by hockey players in 2018. Jamie Strachan has more.
I assure you. Under bright lights and intense scrutiny, an apology from London's police chief.
On behalf of the London Police Service, my sincerest apology to the victim, to her family, for the amount of time that it has taken to reach this point.
It's been nearly 6 years since a 20-year-old woman went to London police with allegations of a sexual assault at this London hotel. The alleged incident happened after a Hockey Canada gala and allegedly involved members of the World Junior team in town celebrating a gold medal. In 2019, London police closed their investigation, only to reopen it in 2022.
Upon review of the occurrence, it was determined that there were additional steps that could be taken to advance the investigation.
Last month, 5 members of the team, 4 of them current NHLers, were charged with 1 count of sexual assault. One player faces an additional charge that the other 4 do not. Dylan Dubé, Carter Hart, Cal Foote, and Michael McLeod are all currently on leave from their teams. The chief insisted no special treatment was given.
I'm not a hockey player. I don't know nothing about hockey. This is a sexual assault investigation.
Police said new leads, additional witnesses, and evidence not available in 2019 led to charges, but wouldn't say why it took 6 years to get to this point.
I can't answer that question, I'm sorry.
I can't speak to that.
I can't answer that.
This longtime London criminal defense lawyer called the chief's apology significant.
It does seem to me that when the chief of police comes out and apologizes as many times as he did, that apology is based on there's something wrong inside his house.
London police have faced fierce criticism for their handling of this case.
A specific victim in this case deserves to know the answers as soon as possible. Otherwise, how can we trust this investigation going forward? How can we trust a police or organization that didn't press charges the first time?
It's estimated this case could take almost 2 more years to finally reach trial. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, London.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is in Ottawa. She's opening a new provincial office in an effort to promote Alberta in the nation's capital. But a lingering controversy got most of the attention. Rafi Boudjikanian has the latest.
Protect trans kids! Protect trans kids!
This may not have been the red carpet welcome Alberta's premier was expecting. Opposition to her recently announced transgender policies from the public, but also from Justin Trudeau's only Alberta cabinet minister.
She's taking away the safe space for some young people. What she has proposed to ban young LGBTQ2 kids from being who they are puts lives at risk.
Danielle Smith officially began her Ottawa visit Monday, shortly after announcing her intention to ban gender-affirming surgery for minors who want to transition in her province, prohibit hormone blockers and puberty treatment to anyone under 16, and force minors who want to transition to come out to their parents first.
We just need to take a considered approach on this and make sure that young people are being fully informed.
Opposition to those plans has been vocal in Alberta, some suggesting Smith is giving in to the most socially conservative parts of her base. She insisted she has support.
I've had many conversations with members of the trans community, and it's not a single voice and it's not a single perspective. I want to make sure that young people are not closing off options to themselves prematurely.
Smith says conversations will continue for months before formally introducing the new gender policies this fall. But so far, the conversations haven't included other politicians.
I was wondering if you had any discussion with Pierre Poilievre about these transgender policies.
No, I've not had a conversation with him.
The federal Conservative leader himself only waded into the debate when asked by journalists.
It's time for Justin Trudeau to stop distracting and dividing Canadians. Let parents raise kids and provinces run schools and hospitals. That's my common sense approach.
The federal government has said it is considering all options, including a court challenge to counter Smith's transgender policies. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Harm reduction workers are raising a red flag about an animal tranquilizer that's found its way into Ottawa's street drug supply. When it's mixed with fentanyl, it's known as zombie dope, and it can put users at even greater risk of dying. Guy Kenville has more.
The sedative called Xylazine is used by veterinarians to tranquilize horses. When injected or smoked by humans, it can be nasty stuff. Extended blackouts, skin lesions, which, if untreated, could lead to amputations. That's why downtown Ottawa clinics like this one are on red alert. Nurse Derek St. John oversees a supervised consumption site just off Rideau Street. Last week, for the first time, they found Xylazine inside fentanyl samples brought to them by users of the clinic. That complicates the clinic's ability to help people who have an overdose.
We have oxygen and we have Narcan. The Narcan will reverse the opioid component of the overdose, but it can't touch anything that's not an opioid. So it'll work with fentanyl. It won't work with Xylazine.
Xylazine hasn't just been found in the Rideau Street area. Another clinic north of here has found it 6 times in the last month, again cut with fentanyl. Users risk exposing themselves to a dog's breakfast of surprise ingredients, which is why St. John is relieved that his clinic recently got its hands on this machine.
Sounds like a printer. It sure does. It's a really neat device.
St. John showed us how this drug tester works after yet another batch of Xylazine turned up at Sandy Hill.
You really only need 1 to 20 milligrams of drug to be able to test.
That tiny morsel goes on a chip about the size of a matchbook, and that goes into a computer bank connected to a laptop via Bluetooth. In about 5 minutes, the results show up on screen.
So that's fentanyl with Xylazine in it. So just because you're getting the green stuff doesn't mean that it's what it was yesterday.
It might sound counterintuitive to some, but no matter the test results, users get their drugs back.
To think of the harm reduction umbrella is to think of harm reduction kind of like a seatbelt. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get in an accident. It can make it a lot, it won't make it as bad.
You have to meet somebody where they're at. So if somebody has a substance and it tests positive, it's ultimately their choice. You can inform them of what it is. Also really important that you have the knowledge and then you can tell your coworkers just to be on the lookout for what they're injecting.
St. John says the clinic does encourage people to keep Narcan on them and to not take the drugs if they're alone. Guy Kenville, CBC News, Ottawa.
This is the CFBC's largest detachment, home to elite units, federal and municipal scope. Congratulations on making the cut.
Have you spoken with your father?
I'm coming for you and everyone like you.
I would rather be Baroque than blue. Lots of reasons to not be a cop. A Surrey girl should know all of them.
Maybe you should reconsider the uniform and everything that it represents.
I'd rather fight from inside it to make a change.
Why, hello. It's me, Seth Rogen. 10 potters will be facing off in the most extraordinary ceramics competition show that this country has ever seen.
I'm Jen Robertson, and I'll be your host.
So are these potters ready?
This exploded.
To test their skills at the wheel and push themselves every week?
Oh, no.
So the ones that do stand out, they really do stand out.
And who will be named champion?
I'm excited to see it. Oh, wow!
Of the Great Canadian Pottery Throwdown.
How can any of this be fair?
Now you might think, hey, we just need more doctors, but that's not really it.
A Russian scheme here shows you where it starts, where it ends.
Were you really willing to risk that job? Yes.
At Thunder Bay's favorite festival, Wake the Giant.
Ta-da! There it is.
appears we have a mystery to solve.
You will be next.
He's dead. A murderer was murdered.
Toronto Constabulary, stop!
Here we go.
Make it mini!
I'm gonna push it. Let's go.
My hands are shaking.
This is all very overwhelming.
Don't expect anything normal.
I can't believe it. I'm here.
One of the most remote corners of the world is now just a phone call away, if you are cool with the potential roaming charges, that is. A Norwegian telecom has launched the world's southernmost cell phone service with 4G service in Antarctica. The coverage is for this remote Norwegian research station and its in-house scientists and staff. It also helps experts collect real-time data on glaciers, local geology, and radiation. But of course, operating on the frozen continent means the equipment needs special protection from the extreme elements. Yellowknife's Bristol Pit is getting lots of attention these days. The gravel pit turned snowboard hill is the subject of a new documentary. The film is sponsored by Canadian clothing company Arc'teryx, and it takes a look at the unique, rugged snowboard culture carving up the pit.
Yeah, so the pit is just a pit. It's a hole in the ground. It was excavated when they were building the airport to get some gravel. It was a gravel pit for the runways, and people have been snowboarding at the pit for the last 20, maybe 30 years now. Yellowknife's snowboard culture is rugged, ragged, and tough. The rope tow won't run past -30, but that doesn't usually stop people. We'll get people hiking the hill, and the kids are out here even in -29, and they're tough, and the culture is growing, and every year we have more participants.
I'm really grateful, honestly, that this film crew's come here and they're, kind of showcasing what we've got going on. A really, really great group of people doing it. Really, really fun time. And yeah, they came, for right now, but they're going to be coming back in the spring to do a little bit more, and already excited for it.
The idea kind of started like a few years ago. I was doing research for another potential series that I was pitching around about like off the beaten path, like weird ski areas. I had heard about Bristol Pit through a friend, Liam, who lives in Yellowknife. Yeah, I kind of knew about it from him, and then I was doing a bunch of research for other things, and then the idea kind of just fizzled for the whole series. But then I figured it would be cool to reignite a film about Bristol Pit through sort of that series. And I approached Arc'teryx with it, and they really liked it. So yeah, they came on as a sponsor, and here we are, full steam ahead. I think it'll end up on Arc'teryx's YouTube. The film's going to be like 10 to 12 minutes is the idea. We'll see what happens when we actually start editing it, but that's the plan right now. So it'll be a web piece, and then we'll submit to some film festivals and hopefully do a festival run at some point too. Bristol Pit is interesting because it's an old gravel pit. Like, it was used for something else entirely. And we were really interested in this, like a story of like sort of DIY, like, I don't know if renegade is the right word, but like kind of just make do with what you got sort of mentality. And that was just super apparent.
When I was growing up, we learned here, we would bring our snowboards, Jackfish Lake. We would go to the cross-country ski club and get yelled at by the skiers, like use their tiny, tiny little hills there. Yellowknife is amazing in supporting kids, being super active in so many different sports. The majority of those sports are organized. You have coaches. You go and you meet your coach and you like do different practices. You practice different activities and moves and like speed and all that kind of stuff. The skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing culture is all about like just going and chilling with your friends, challenging each other, having fun, making games, like just you're playing. And that is like, you get here when the lift is running, there's a cool crew, a cool vibe, like, you know, you're practicing tricks on the different obstacles, there's music blasting, like it's not like any other sport up in Yellowknife, so it's completely different. It's very special.
Wrestling fans in Iqaluit were treated to some exhilarating action this weekend. 13 wrestlers from Quebec's North Shore Pro Wrestling hit the mat at the Sarnate Hotel on Saturday. Almost 200 people came out to watch.
With the number we had tonight, it sounds like we're worth thousands.
Shipping a ring, equipment, and organizing travel for the wrestlers to Iqaluit was no easy feat, but organizers say it was worth it.
I'm so happy. People were cheering, like the wrestlers are happy. If the wrestlers are happy, I'm happy.
It was the first time many of the wrestlers traveled to Nunavut, and lots of them say they can't wait to come back. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. We'll leave you with a look at the weather. Have a good night.
Who's that?
He's fired!
I'm starting to think you don't know what a joke is.
You're gonna eat nothing but raw spleen.
Getting into peak physical shape is 50% training, 50% diet.
Yeah.
Never occurred to me to bring lawn chairs out here.
Never occurred to the Egyptians to build the pyramids until it did.
Oh! Simpler times.
Let's set you up with a lunch date.
You're deaf? I don't know sign.
This feels a little wrong.
If accessibility is wrong, we don't want to be right.
Spicy.
Oh, do tell.
Breaking news. The critics are talking.
Oh, this is it.
Imagine the Wonder Years if it were written by Gene Shepard.
They twisted it all up.
Well, you can't trust a newsman.
Highly recommended.
Onwards.
Onwards.
Heartwarming.
This doesn't mean I'm better than anyone here tonight. It just says it.
100% fresh.
Well, I suppose we don't need to get rid of the cable right this second.
Son of a critch.
You look like a cod gasping for air.
Name something you see people do on TV that you secretly could do better.
Host.
I knew that was funny.
Family Feud Canada. Watch free on CBC Gem.
We want you to know that you can ask us anything. Need help with your Riz?
You just made Riz uncool.
There is something that's been bothering me. Are mutual funds or ETFs better for my long-term goals?
Load weapon!
Welcome to the show!
Fire! Big, 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 big!
I'm from the Liberal Party, and I...
What do we know
About that with Andrew Chang.
I think we can explain.
Watch free on CBC Gem.